Hello, welcome to another tutorial video. I'm going to be taking a slight departure from the way I normally do videos to go into something in a lot more depth and with a lot more patience, hopefully to help as many people as possible. Normally I only attempt to show you A grade stuff or A star grade stuff simply because I just believe if you set the bar really high and you aim for that, then obviously you've got a chance of achieving something higher. But obviously it's not really a wise choice, because for some people getting a C is good for getting an A to others. So I'm going to try and go through middle of the range grades and then go for the higher range. Now what I'm going to do in the next series of videos, I'm planning on producing 10 on this sequence, focusing just on the English literature paper, but I know I've done videos on them before just explaining them, but what I'm going to go through here is everything in detail. So the first thing I'm going to do in the first video is obviously go through this explanation, and then I'm going to go through the assessment objectives and the section A requirements, what you're expected to do in section A. Then in the second video I'm going to go and try and write a C grade attempt. Okay, obviously I'm going to do that in real time, so I'm going to type it as I talk, so there's going to be a lot of mistakes, etc., but you get the general gist of how you plan and write a C grade essay. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing with an A grade essay. I'm going to plan that, show the differences, and then write an essay and again show the differences on the same questions. So hopefully you can see a bit of a difference between the C and the A. Then I'm going to hand over the essays to an examiner, to an AQA examiner, someone who's actually examined for been an examiner for AQA in the past, and he's also a head of English, and he's going to actually make a screencast for you with an explanation basically of why this gets a C in his opinion, rather than just me telling you that this should be roughly a C. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing again with an A grade for section A. And then I'm going to go through all that again as best I can with section B, depending on obviously if I can find the piece from the exam. So hopefully in doing that you'll receive a very slow and measured introduction to planning and writing an essay to whichever level you're obviously working at. If you are an A grade student, I would still recommend looking at the C grade one so you can see where you're going to build from, the platforms you're going to step a little further. The text or the questions I'm going to be approaching from the exam, from last year's exam, are an Inspector Calls and Of Mice and Men, because they, I think, are the two most popular texts that people will be studying up and down the country. So we move on then to this section, going through section the AO, and looking at the section A requirements. And it's very important to know that while they're similar to B, there is a distinct difference of worth about 10%, as you can see from this section here. Section A is worth the 20% of your entire literature paper, obviously 50% of the exam, and then section B is also worth 20%, but you can see the AOs are split up differently. So the first thing we need to know about, what is this AO? And AO basically stands for assessment objective. This is what you're being assessed on your ability to do. So the AOs are exactly the same whether you're aiming for an F or whether you're aiming for an A star. Okay, this is the area or the arena of skill that you're being tested on. You need to be able to respond to text critically and imaginatively, select and evaluate relevant textual detail to illustrate and support interpretations. So basically that means you have to answer a question, support it with evidence, and then comment on your evidence. You do not at any point, for any reason, retell the story. Okay, you might just mention something like as an adjoining point, but for no reason at all, at no point at all will you need to retell the story. So if you think, hey, I know the story really well, I'm going to write that all down, that will not get you a C. You need to pick out quotes and then discuss why they are relevant. And obviously you'll be going through that with you. The second AO for section 1 is section A, explain how language, structure and form contribute to a writer's presentation of ideas, themes and settings. So basically we're looking to discuss the writer's craft, like the different elements that he combines, the skill with which he does it, how cleverly interlaced or placed things are, and the choices he makes in the words he gives certain characters or in the things that he actually has in a scene, etc. Now they're obviously all like the three sides of the same triangle, but the idea is you're focusing on a slightly different elements as you go through it, and it will make more sense when we actually come to writing an answer, because obviously talking about language and structure, they're both as important as each other, but obviously they're not the same thing. Although the structure of the language, or the timing that the language comes in a play, for example, if we're looking at Inspector Calls, is what's important about it. And then we're gonna look at all that in detail. So for part A then, specifically for a C grade, this is what we need to be able to do. Again, from the AQA exam mark scheme, we need to be able to show a considered and qualified response to the task. So basically we need to be able to write well, clearly, an answer to the task clearly, and it has to make sense. We also have to make a considered and qualified response to the text itself. So we have to know how to answer the question and know what the text is about, and that has to come across in our writing. Then we have to make sure that there are details linked to the interpretations. So if we're picking something out, then we need to be able to explain why we think it is that way. So for example, if one of the details I was picking out was the use of a dash or an exclamation mark, I might say that the interpretation is that the dash is being used here to allow someone else to come in and talk. It's being used to show that they're stuttering and that they're uncomfortable. Or for an exclamation mark, it might be that someone's really excited or someone's really upset. And so the actual detail is the punctuation, in this case, the punctuation using question, and the interpretation is what I think it actually means. 4.4, appreciation of the consideration of a writer's use of language and a form and or structure and or effect on the reader's audience. So how does it, being able to actually discuss how the writer does what they do to what effect. So why do they use a certain word? Why does someone walk in at a certain place? Why, and what ultimately did the reader or audience take from that? And then lastly, thoughtful consideration of ideas and themes. So thoughtful consideration, basically, again, it just means an above average analysis of the ideas and themes and the ideas of the writer's actually trying to get across. The information, everything you put in your essay, will be presented in a way which assists with communication of meaning, and the syntax and spelling are generally accurate. So as you're putting something across, an examiner will be able to read it and not need to reread it. It's got to be clear. It's not going to trip them up. The spelling of certain words attempted is going to be very, it's going to be fine. There's not going to be any problems where you spell a word so badly wrong that the examiner is going to misunderstand what you've put, and also the examiner is not really going to need to reread several times what you've written to try and understand it. It's going to make sense. So those are all the elements of Section A, and basically all we're trying to do is we're trying to do our PE points, point evidence explanation, and we're trying to make them very clear. The next thing that we're going to do in the video is we're going to start answering this question from the 2011 paper.